All right, what's going on, everybody? This is Sean Vaughn, and welcome to Champions Material. As always, you all know I'm glad to be here. I appreciate everyone who tuned into last week's episode. As always, throughout all Champions Material podcasts, we introduce the topics that we dive into up front. So as they're being discussed throughout the pod, it gives you, the listener, the opportunity to think, form your ideas. Any feedback that you may have, you know where to go. champions.materialsv@gmail.com. We want them. Your feedback so far has been tremendous, and I appreciate it. It has only helped to grow this podcast and make it better. So today is a very special episode for me. You all know, if you've tuned into Champions Material, gaming is something that I'm passionate about. It's been a part of, me in my life since I was a kid, and it's never going to change. I've grown and evolved, and I feel like the gaming industry overall has grown and evolved. So now that we have gotten some showcases, and now that we've got some prices and some dates on our next gen consoles, as well as release dates and all of that good stuff, it's time to dive in. So joining me today to dive into all things next gen, and this guy right here is a true original, man. I've known this gentleman for 10 years now, man. Think about that.
10 years, man. That's a long time.
Years. And we actually met within the realm of gaming. And, since then, our friendship has evolved. We've been great friends. We've had some great conversations through the years, especially about gaming, but just about life, Again, a true original. So I had to have him on. Welcome to Champions Material, my guy, Ben Chandler. What's going on, man?
Man, hey, we're here, man. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm excited about it. A lot of people have been waiting. It's been a long wait,
yes.
With everything with the pandemic, a drip feed of information. Right. For us to finally get the cards on the table, so close to launch, it's fever pitch right now, man. So I'm excited. We're ready.
All right, here we go. All right, so let's go ahead and highlight these topics that we're going to discuss, and it's time to get into it. All right, so next gen, just, the reaction. Now that we've had the PlayStation and Xbox showcases, shout out to Nintendo as well. They have, they've had a recent direct. I checked that out. We know the games. We've seen some games that have been premiered. We know the release dates for these gaming systems. We know the prices. So Ben and I will give you our take on all of that, from our perspective. And while we're doing that, what's yours? All right, 4 for 4. So I'm putting you in a tough spot here, man. We talked about this, but we're 4 systems in now. We've had the PS1, 2, 3, and 4. Shout out, obviously, to the PSP and the Vita as well. Got to get them in. But so far, we've had 4 home consoles. All right, so if you can only pick one game from all 4 consoles that stands out to you above the rest, name it. We're going to do the same thing.
I'm going to let you know now, this one was tough, man. This one was very tough for me. So I'm excited to talk about it, because it might ruffle some feathers, but I'm here for it.
Hey, come for us, all right? We built for it. Now, in the wish list, no doubt so far, between Xbox and PlayStation, we've seen some great games that are coming down the line to next gen. Really looking forward to them. So Ben and I are going to let you know a few games that we have not seen yet. Again, we call this the wish list. Games that we haven't seen or we haven't heard about, but that we hope to see sometime down the line as we get further into this console generation. So, you know what, man, let's just go ahead and get into this. And right before we do, full disclosure, the host, myself, Sean Vaughn, I am an employee of Sony, and specifically an employee of PlayStation. But the opinions of Champions Material are mine and mine alone. So I just wanted to go ahead and get that out the way. And now that we have, let's get to it, man. So I'm going to kick this to you to start, man. Okay. Now that, again, we've had the showcases and everything like that. We've seen the systems. We know the specs, the whole nine. Just next gen, just what was your overall reaction to everything that we've gotten finally as the information really, got out to us in the last couple of weeks?
So here's the thing. For me, obviously the SSD tech is huge. It's huge because we've been waiting on that for a while. For multiple reasons. One, obviously, these games are getting humongous, over 100 gigs plus. You look at Call of Duty, you look at Red Dead, you look at, so many other titles that are such large open worlds that even recently I was playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey. And it took me like 3 minutes to get through the load screen at the beginning, just to get the game started. By the time it loaded up, I was almost done already.
Did you have lunch?
Right, exactly.
What's going on here?
Let me make that happen, and it did,
Right.
So obviously SSDs have been around for a decade at this point, but we know what happens when consoles, jump in there and it becomes a mainstream thing, which only benefits game development.
Right.
So, with the SSD tech, but more importantly, the advancement that PS5 is making with the IO throughput, things that are hopefully looking to actually change the landscape of how games are developed.
Right.
Instead of it being, the traditional style of, corridor load. How can we do that and put that data so fast through there that we can change the way we think about it, same way virtual reality does. It takes you out of that traditional focus and starts looking at, all right, how do we change the mold and come up with new genres of games, things like that. So both of them have, fantastic technology inside. But if you remember, we had this conversation maybe February, March 2017.
All right, taking it back. Okay.
And one thing that we had addressed, you had asked me a while ago, like if there are any changes that I would make to any launch systems.
Right.
Okay. And I always said this, and full disclaimer, at one point I've owned every system. Like at one point I had 3DS, XL, Vita, PlayStation TV,
okay.
PS3, PS4 Pro, Xbox One X, and a PlayStation VR. Right. So at one point I literally had like every system.
Had it all.
Right.
Had it all, yeah.
So for me, if it's got games on it that I like and I enjoy the system, I end up owning it at some point. So for me, launch titles are important. And the one thing I always said, as a lifelong PlayStation fan, the one thing I always wanted was, all right, so going into the launch of the gen, have some bangers, have some games ready at launch that day one when I get in, not the promise of a year or two from now, but day one. So when you're talking about Spider-Man day one and Demon Souls day one, and if you look at the content from day one through the entire first calendar year, it's insane. I don't think Sony's ever put that amount of content that is anticipated in the first calendar year that they're out. And number two was, especially with the shift from this past gen into more digital, and the landscape we are now, I got to be able to keep my content. If I can keep my content into the next generation, I don't have a reason to leave. If I start over, I have a reason to look at something else at launch.
Exactly. Okay.
So March 2017, we're looking at the Switch. And we're like, man, looks good, but it's only got 6 games to launch. But it had Zelda. And we said that would be huge for that, even though it was essentially a Wii U port, right? Mm-hmm. And then right after that, and it blew up, and we said, Xbox is looking at that going, man, we got to have Halo at launch. We got to have, and we know that debacle.
Got to.
We know that debacle, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Oh, Craig the Brute meme. That one had me dead. It'll be solid. And there's a recent acquisition that shook up the whole industry that, we might touch on at some point. But for the most part, that shifted the narrative of, it doesn't matter. They had like 1-2 switch and things and no diss to that, but I'm not buying a console for a party game.
Right.
So that impact was humongous for the uptake of Switch, and then they had Mario at Christmas.
Right.
So the two things I said Sony had to have at launch is what they have, and that is 99% of the PS4 portfolio carry over.
Yes.
You look at the percentage, they're over, I think, 113 or maybe probably 114 million PS4s and climbing. So that base doesn't have a reason to leave if they can carry their whole library over. Mm-hmm. And then you got bangers at launch, which traditionally, like PS4 was fantastic. But at launch, it had Knack and Killzone Shadowfall, right? And most of us actually ended up playing Warframe a lot, which was on PC already, right?
Right.
Had Infamous in the spring, and then it was Drive Club and Little Big Planet the following.
Shout out to the Resogun, by the way.
Resogun. Yes, Resogun. I'm sorry.
Underrated.
What a quality title.
Had to get that.
I'm sorry, Housemark. I love y'all. I do. I'm excited for Returnal, by the way.
Yes.
But traditionally, what would happen is after about the first year and a half, that's when the big titles started hitting for Sony. Then it was nonstop. Right. Yeah. So as big a debacle as Xbox One was, right, pre-launch, if you actually look at that launch lineup, it was decent. They had Dead Rising. They had, even though it was a smaller free-to-play, Killer Instinct, Rise looked good. It was repetitive, but demonstrated, a graphical leap.
You saw effort.
Right.
That's what you saw.
And they had Titanfall coming up in the spring. So they had a solid launch. And the reason they had a solid launch is because they had nothing the last 3 years for the 360, right? They had Kinect games and Gears of War Judgment. That was it.
Yeah.
And if you don't believe me, look it up. So, but they start out 360 heavy, so looking at the impact of having things day one available is huge. So to me, that showed that even though PlayStation had really, regained that kind of confidence and competition, that they did not slack. They did not say, all right, yeah, I know we smashed on PS4 gen, but we're putting all that energy into how can we bring like exclusive blockbuster content in the first calendar year, which they've never put that much into it before.
Do you believe, real quick, that, you talked about Microsoft looking at what Nintendo did with the Switch launch. Could it be said that we did the same thing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that was important because you couldn't find the Switch when it came out. Zelda was that big of a deal. And of course it was so well made, aside from the weapons breaking. I could do without that feature, but everything else, to be honest with you, and I'm not a big open world game person. You really ought to have something that keeps my attention, whether it's the traversal or the environment. Those are the two things for me on open world games that I really have to be into in order to enjoy an open world game like Ghost of Tsushima. Like that's what I love so much about that game. Right. So just to give you an example, like it was a quality title. So I'm hyped, man. I'm excited about, what's to offer, especially from the most recent PS5 showcase and seeing, 7 minutes of Spider-Man gameplay. Man. Seeing that Demon Souls looks absurdly beautiful.
Running those trailers back in 4K.
It'll do something to you.
That was 30 minutes that I can replay, back to back. But
right.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. So, for me, man, this is, new tech is always exciting. Right. But for the first time in a long time, I'm more excited about the game's day one than necessarily just the tech itself. Like that's how impressive this first year that has shown me for PS5 that nobody else has shown for a whole calendar year. You're looking at, bro, Spider-Man, and obviously Miles Morales is a smaller chunk, right? Not full-fledged 25 hours like the OG Spider-Man, but 10, 12-hour experience, similar to Uncharted Lost Legacy, but still extremely quality title. Demon Souls at launch, which shocked the fool out of me, bro. That was the heavy hitter.
Yeah.
Ratchet & Clank, which was incredible, being able to use the SSD tech to shift between worlds on the fly. Looks incredible, and I'm a huge Ratchet & Clank fan. So shout out to Insomniac, man. They are. They're pulling out all the stops this gen.
They really are.
And then you're looking at Gran Turismo, potentially God of War and Horizon in the first calendar year. That's absurd. Like that's absurd. So as a fan, I can appreciate the fact that they're not resting on their laurels and they're still trying to bring that same quality even earlier in the gen.
Absolutely, man. And for me, especially watching the showcase and Sony's emphasis on making sure that at the end of the advertisement, the gameplay trailer and everything like that, available at launch. At launch. I don't recall with any, and I'm saying any, new console, that released previous, including the first 4 PlayStations, as you alluded to. When you think about the fact that when you're seeing at launch, I don't recall seeing that and having that emphasized as much. It was clear that was part of the objective, that you're seeing this and you're having obviously a positive reaction to it. But then to know, alongside of that, this is day one. Yeah. This is not January. This is not February. Yeah. This is not in time for Christmas. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
It was day one. So watching that back to back to back, and and for the audience out there of Champions Material, who you're talking to. I have a way of really equating a lot of things to boxing because I feel like boxing can, or the lessons from it can be, applied to so many other scenarios. And I felt like with the PS5 and that showcase, it was Tyson, round one.
Absolutely.
No robe.
Nothing.
No socks. No intro music.
You're just going straight for the punch.
Say what you got to say and ring the damn bell.
Yep.
like we're coming out swinging.
Yep.
And we're knocking everyone and everything out.
Yep.
Round one. And if you get to round two, sorry.
Good luck.
Good luck, right? But here's a key that, and you touched on it a moment ago. Because of a track record, and we're now going to our fifth console where we've seen this, returners. You highlighted that.
Mm-hmm.
What is that, a new IP?
Brand new.
So here's the thing. Not only do you have the ferocious, just come out there and, destruct and destroy mentality of a Mike Tyson as far as your launch lineup, but I have seen for over 2 decades now that you have the ability to also innovate.
Yes. And
come up with something new. So you're not going to lose steam on the back end of putting out so much content early, because you have proven worldwide studios, your partnerships with other developers, that not only are you developing, basically, you're developing content that is going to continue to like grow what we've seen with previous IPs that have already been introduced. So, okay, God of War, it was reimagined, but we've seen it before.
Right.
But you can put a new take on it and it's excellent and fresh.
Yeah.
But you also have proven console after console, generation after generation, that you can hit us with a Detroit Become Human.
Yep. You
can hit us with, in my opinion, the best IP that was introduced on the PS4. Ghost of Tsushima, a very close second. Horizon Zero Dawn.
Absolutely.
Right?
Fantastic, yeah.
So I know going into the PS5, I'm confident not only are you coming out swinging, but when we get to round 5, when we get to the championship rounds in year 7, 8, 9, that we'll still be getting new content that matters, that has a stamp, that's going to be memorable.
I agree. And what's interesting is I think Sony really figured that out PS3 generation. Because you remember the launch was a lot of new IP, because traditionally people were more susceptible to trying something new at launch.
Right.
I got nothing, Heavenly Sword, Resistance, things like that. So
Uncharted eventually.
Right. So, and then it became, well, we can stand on the strength of these IPs that are established and introduce new IPs.
Have the confidence to
So when you have things like Ghost of Tsushima be the last like big exclusive for what is arguably their second best generation so far, and it'd be a banger, like a heavy hit or a home run, it just speaks to the strength and the confidence you have to be like, let's go in here. And yes, so we got Last of Us Part 2, one of the most anticipated sequels of all time.
Yes.
Regardless of leaks online, right?
Right.
Followed up by a brand new IP from, a studio that hadn't done anything in 5 years. Since
what was it? First Light,
2014.
Think about that. You had First Light, which I think was that was tied to Infamous Second Son, and they have been. Now, as we found out on the back end, they were very busy,
right?
Plenty busy, and they did their homework and created what I think is a masterpiece. But I understand where you're coming from.
So, to me, that's impressive, because to me they're starting to figure out how to continue to deliver masterpiece content and still find ways to innovate and grow, and which is hugely important. So that everything doesn't become homogenized. Right. Now, there are still some things like in the first party portfolio I'd like to see, like shooters or things that diversify just a little bit more. But as far as showing their mastery, like they know what they're great at, similar to Nintendo. Nintendo knows what they're great at, and they still continue to. But they know they got Zelda, they know they got Mario, they know they got those things. But then you see other new IP like Splatoon or things like that, right? Yeah. So I feel like Sony has established themselves in that pillar of the gaming community, where it's like we have dominated the third-person action adventure genre.
Right.
So we will continue to provide that content, but still give you something else. So I can appreciate that from that aspect. So
absolutely, man. Now, again, I think it's been pretty well established that we both like what we've seen so far from PlayStation, and it has us looking very much forward to November the 12th. All right, November the 10th. We know what's going on there.
Yep.
And we got to get them in, because ultimately, they are also in the same space within the realm of gaming. The Xbox Series X, the Xbox Series S, we know specs, we know price. What are you, as far as from an Xbox perspective, if anything, and again, just this is all about total transparency. Is there anything that you've seen from the system side of things, launch lineup side of things, and of course we touched on earlier. We know Halo has been delayed, but better late than never. We'll see what they do with that. But also the Game Pass, which the way that they have got that set up, there's some stuff there, man.
Right.
So like, where are you coming from on the Xbox side of things, from what you've seen at this point?
So let me say this. Everybody has their own cup of tea, right?
Right.
Like, when I was a kid, I started out Nintendo. PS1 was my brother's. I had a 64.
Yeah.
Then once PS2 hit, it was the system for me. Okay. But as I stated earlier, I've owned everything at any point, right? So OG Xbox, I was a huge fan of Republic Commando, Star Wars. Shout out Star Wars. Love that.
Yeah.
KOTOR, Knights of the Old Republic, 1 and 2. Love those. And original Fable. Right. So that was my thing. 360 came along, and aside from the atrocious failure rate of the original 360s, has some killer games, right? Especially, you look at, they launched 05, so they kind of had that space themselves, but Oblivion, BioShock, you had Mass Effect launch, right? So Ninja Gaiden coming back, Ninja Gaiden 2. So they had some extremely high quality. But near the end of the 360 gen, I can't believe I forgot Gears of War. Gears of War, took over third-person cover shooters for that whole generation, right? So, but what happened is right leading into Judgment, I really started to kind of fall off from what their first party was offering.
Yeah,
because they had shifted so much to Kinect. And then, once the Xbox One debacle happened, and it was cancellation after delay from Fable Legends getting canceled to Scalebound getting canceled to Crackdown 3 being canceled.
That one hurt. Scalebound hurt.
Yeah, Scalebound I was really looking forward to. And sorry, Crackdown 3 wasn't canceled, but so poorly delayed. And then when it came out,
what was that?
Extremely poor reception.
Was that?
So for me, it really was like, man, they really have to revamp that portfolio. Like they really do. So for me, they hadn't shown me much while Sony was getting stronger. That whole Xbox One generation really didn't do much for me as far as the first party content, what they were delivering outside. Now, what they've done in the recent years with the studio acquisitions, and most recently the huge one, right? The elephant in the room, which is, when you're buying out Bethesda and you've got Doom, Wolfenstein, Fallout, Elder Scrolls.
Purchased some ammo, didn't they?
So essentially what that did, but here's what it's everybody's kind of diverging into their own lane. Whereas what happened before, if you remember when Nintendo tried to compete in the same realm with the GameCube, they realized very quickly, that's not really where our strength is.
Right.
So, once they merge and create the Switch, that's their lane. That's what they're great at. Sony has mastered being the center console in the living room.
Right.
Microsoft has for years tried to push closer and closer into the PC realm, which is why you saw so many games day and date go Xbox PC and Game Pass. Now, if I'm going to be fully transparent with you, like looking at it and going, if I can buy a system and pay $15 a month and never have to buy a game, pretty much, if you're looking at the
day one,
with that huge acquisition.
We talked about that earlier, particularly on Game Pass. Is they advertise that day one as well.
Day one, and you're getting the next, and not just established franchises, but new IPs like Starfield, and new things that could potentially be on the rise. That's extremely enticing. As a gamer who and the older I become, it's more and more difficult to find time. Right. To make that investment, but also to invest that level of money, right, for something that I don't have as much time for. So that's extremely appealing. Now, obviously, we know it's going to be a couple years before that acquisition really starts to take hold and we see the benefits. But I'd be lying if I didn't say that's a great push for Game Pass, and I think the best justification for Game Pass that they've made so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, man. I mean, the reality of the situation is it's bang for your buck, right? Yeah. And, one of the things that Ben just pointed out, and I think is worth repeating is, when we fell in love with gaming as kids, You know what we also had time as kids? Or we had as kids, we had time,
Mm-hmm.
right? We had more time, right? And then, all of a sudden, we get grown out here and responsibilities take over. It's not necessarily that you have the time that you used to have. Now, more often than not, you're making time, which is why, on a previous episode of Champions Material, one of the reasons why I said, okay, what defines a replayable for me is the game has to grab me, because when the game grabs me, I'll make time for it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when you're talking about the Xbox, when you're talking about Game Pass, you're talking about pretty much having access day one to all of this. And it's not as much of a financial commitment,
Right.
when you don't necessarily have the time commitment unless you make it. That could be appealing. So again,
Mm-hmm.
there's, pros to every last one of these consoles. Real quick before we move forward, on the Nintendo side of things, I simply don't believe that they're just sitting back watching this.
No, of course not.
Nintendo is doing something. What are they doing, man?
Can we talk about rumors? Can we address it? All right. So
Okay.
obviously, there's been Nintendo Switch Pro rumors, for
There have.
at least 2 years, I think, at this
There
point.
has. Yeah.
So, it just, as far as, a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, there were rumors coming out that Nintendo was, telling developers to have their games 4K ready. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see something springtime, maybe around the time, if we look at the track record and we see the history of success for the launch of the Switch, and they have a sequel to Breath of the Wild coming out,
Mm-hmm.
and you end that quarter with a bang, and you start with potentially a newer, revised version with Breath of the Wild 2.
An upgrade, yeah. Upgraded system.
That's very much a possibility. You could do something like, something that's a bolstered hardware 350, drop the regular Switch to 250, drop the Switch Lite to 180. And you've got something for kids, something for teens, something for adults. You better believe Nintendo's got something cooking.
And what did we just talk about as far as, me and you are concerned as adults? It's the time commitment and the financial commitment. Okay, you come out with, and he just basically gave you what could potentially be prices for 3 different models. So what does that equate to, right? Choices.
Yeah.
And, again, Nintendo has always been in their own lane. We've kind of had a little joke in the past where if you were comparing these game consoles to big cats, the Xbox could very well be the lion. It's big, it's bold, it has a clear identity. You know what it goes after. The PlayStation is the tiger. Technically, it's actually bigger and stronger than the lion, even though you don't look at it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very versatile. It can operate and hunt and do what it needs to do in many different areas. And Nintendo is more like the cheetah. It's a specialist.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't necessarily do what the others do, but what it does, it stands alone. Right? So Nintendo is not just going to sit back here and just say, okay, well, all the momentum we built with the Switch, we've kind of gotten a bit quiet. But, again, they're not necessarily our direct competition. No, they still have pride. This company has been around for
Absolutely.
a long time.
Mm-hmm.
They can still say that they have the most important game system ever made, right?
Mm-hmm.
The original Nintendo. So I'm just looking forward to, anytime there's next gen, the first thing I think about is games.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next thing I think about is competition. And competition in any area, when you have healthy competition,
it's great.
It pushes you, right? It pushes you.
And to piggyback on that, man, I'm excited about it for that exact reason, because when it gets that competitive and you realize like you really got to go out here and compete for, customer share, mind share, it only benefits the gamers, man. It really does. So because they're pushing out quality content, they're bundling deals, like whatever they can do to grab your attention, keep you in their ecosystem. That's what they're going to do. So to be honest, this is really how I felt the Bethesda deal was. Is Xbox for 2 years essentially has been like, Halo's going to be at launch. That's what we're doing. It's going to be there. So once that got delayed,
we heard it multiple times.
Once that got delayed, and they realized we don't have anything in that window to be ultra competitive aside from Game Pass. To me, that acquisition signal, we ain't gone yet. Mm-hmm. Like we're fighting out here for that mind share, that consumer share. And that's a beautiful thing, man, because that means they could have gone third party and be like, you know what, we're done with hardware.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Sega route, huh?
And when you put that much effort into it, it's great because iron sharpens iron, man. So I'm sure everybody else in the industry is looking at it going, hey, we got to bring some heat.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's great. That's great, man. I'm excited for it.
So am I, man. Next generation gaming, next generation console, next generation experiences. You know, November 10th, November 12th, and beyond. You know, very excited for this to come in the year. And you want to talk about timing? Definitely great timing. And what's been a tough year for many reasons to get these next generation consoles and to see how the industry is pushing forward. Proud to be a part of it, man, and definitely, happy to be a gamer. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
So yeah, man. And we were talking next gen, and obviously we're looking forward naturally. That just makes sense. But I feel like it's also time for us to reflect. I've mentioned this previously, but I think you always will have a more healthy appreciation or a better appreciation for where you're going when you can always double back every now and then and see where you came from. And
Absolutely.
remember those steps, right?
Mm-hmm.
And clearly, and again, the original Nintendo I mentioned it a moment ago, for me, is where modern gaming started, right? So to go from that to where we are now, it's crazy. But before we go too far ahead, as we get ready for next gen, I think it's time to look back. And our next title, or topic, I should say, is 4 for 4, right? So again, we.
Oh man, get ready for this,
Bro.
I'm ready.
So again, I mentioned at the top, we're 4 systems in: PS1, 2, 3, and 4. Again, special. What they say, if like you're in college and you didn't quite make the first team, but a special consideration for PSP and Vita. But we're 4 systems in, and I put this out to Ben, and it was a challenge for the both of us. And it's a challenge for you out there in the audience. If you can only pick one game that defines for you your experience and what means the most to you on the original PlayStation, 2, 3, and now 4, what would it be and why? You knew this was coming. PlayStation 1.
All right.
There's only one game that defines what the PlayStation 1 was to you, that meant the most to you. What was that game and why?
Okay. This one, out of the 4, this was the easiest one for me, because it was the most impactful on my expectation for what video games can do and what they can be. So this was the clear-cut easiest one for me to pick because it still stood the test of time for me. Going back to replayables, right? Talking about how does it hold up today? Mm-hmm. So for me, this one was easy, even though there are a lot of quality games on PS1. But for me, it was Final Fantasy VII. My number 1 game of all time. Thinking about before the Amnesiac story was so overtrodden. For me, that was my first experience with it.
Yeah.
So the cinematic quality, the battle music, just the storytelling in general. I had never played anything like that. And funny story is, I don't know if I told you this before, but I had actually, back when movies was the thing, before Hollywood Video, my parents took me to go rent a game, and I rented Final Fantasy VIII, and I played it and got as far as to the forest where you can fight the Marlboro. And get him as a hidden boss, right?
Right.
And but it was a rental, so I took it back. So I went back to the store, and me not really paying much attention. Mm-hmm. That's what I was looking for. I was looking for Final Fantasy VIII, and I picked up 7, and I put it in the PS1, and I was like, this doesn't look anything like that. This is weird, but I was like, this battle music's pretty good. Like I like it, and started getting to the storyline and what had happened to Sephiroth and all the things that had gone on. And no spoilers for those who haven't played 7 or the remake yet, which is phenomenal. I can't wait for them to. That was another mind-blowing thing for me on PS4, but we'll say that for another day. Just that overall package, man, that's what really kind of set the tone for the types of games that I would enjoy for pretty much all the way up to today. So for me, Final Fantasy VII, that was a no-brainer. So if you want to go PS1,
all right,
let me know.
All right. So put a lot of thought into this, and I think the original PlayStation, in full disclosure, I think, and again, this is like, you can pick any one of these and you'll be fine, but if I was to rank the first 4, it would be PlayStation 2, which I happen to believe is the greatest console of all time.
I would agree.
All due respect to Super Nintendo, those 2, and then it's everything else for me. And then I would go PlayStation 4, and then I will go original PlayStation, and then 3. But again, any one of those 4, you'll be fine. Trust me.
Agreed.
PlayStation 1, it was hard for me to pick. And by the way, just to piggyback off of what you said a moment ago, Final Fantasy 9 is my personal favorite. I know that's not a popular choice.
No, actually, a lot of people think 9 is better,
Okay,
but 7 is still more
we
popular.
out there, right?
So,
we out there. I think that was the last one to appear on the PlayStation 1, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that was the last one.
And then another title that I really gave, some thought to is Legacy of Kain, particularly Soul Reaver, which that game, classic platform, just today, we talked about on Replayables, a game that ages well. Outside of the presentation of the game, everything else is still holds up today in 2020.
I love that. What's funny is I would watch my brother play that because he like the Soul Reaver spin and the Legacy of Kain, and then of course once you were able to play as both of them in one, so my brother played the crap out of those. So even though it wasn't one that I played a lot personally, I can see why. That would be something that would be a jam. Just from watching my brother play that growing up, that was his thing. So
game was perfectly paced. That game was perfectly paced. But the game I'm going to actually touch on, and the reason why I chose this game is because it literally introduced me and brought me stubbornly into a realm that I had for a few years refused to touch, and that was Tekken 2.
Okay.
Tekken 2, original PlayStation. So here I am, growing up. On a previous episode, I talked about how Street Fighter 2, Hyper Fighting on the Genesis, is the first game that really grabbed me. Killer Instinct, once I got the hang of it and I just figured out how to adjust, the way I operated to get good at that game. So for me, the 2D, even if it had a air quotes 3D look to it, it still played 2D, right? So, Street Fighter, Killer Instinct, Mortal Kombat, particularly 3-on, where it was more combos and not just single strikes. So Virtual Fighter, I believe that Virtual Fighter is highly underrated today. We didn't get one, I believe, on this generation. I think the last one was 5, and that was PlayStation 3 and
PSP and 360.
right? So again, much respect to it because that was the first time we had seen sort of like a 3D, like really 3D fighter.
Right.
But I stayed away from it, and I just came up with every excuse. It looks, first of all, it wasn't the most appealing, particularly the first one.
Right.
It was not the most appealing, right? So you get that, you got Fighting Viper, you got all these 3D and original Tekken.
Right.
So when original Tekken hit, friends of mine that I was growing up with at the time, we, coming up, and they were saying like, Sean, you got to try it. And I was the one, whether it was at the arcade or a friend of mine who had a PlayStation.
Love Tekken.
Because I was, at that time, full disclosure, I was team Sega, so I had the Saturn. I was that guy. Yeah, I was that guy. And it became quickly apparent I made the wrong choice, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Hey, Sega Genesis, baby, all the way.
Yeah, for a whole nother day. Yeah, post Genesis with the 32X and Saturn, it was like, what happened? But anyway, the original Tekken, I just refused. I was like, I'm cool on this 3D stuff. I'm gonna stick to what I know.
Okay. And
then Tekken 2 dropped, and much like Virtual Fighter 2 and how improved it was, visually as well as just technically from the original, Tekken 2 and Tekken obviously was no slouch. It was a great game.
But Tekken 2.
But Tekken 2, finally one day I lost a bet. I was supposed to, and it was a bet to see if I can get a girl's number, not knowing that she already had a situation going on, so that didn't turn out well for me, and I lost. So losing that bet, my guy was like, all right.
The games we play.
Yes. It's time.
Right?
It's time to, man. So, the things we did back then before social media when we had to entertain ourselves.
Right.
But anyway, Tekken 2 lost the bet, and my guy, he was like, all right, you up.
Take the sticks.
Take the sticks.
Yeah.
And I sat down, didn't want to do it. Did not want to do it. And then I just randomly went around and I settled on a guy, and my Tekken fans know who I'm talking about, by the name of Paul Phoenix. Reminded me of a guy from Street Fighter.
Hey, Paul. Hey, Paul.
Got him. And one of the things that I do with all fighters, eventually, if I want to really get in the lab and maximize a fighter, I will go into the command menus. I will go into the training modes and just pick up on the rhythm, pick up on the frame rate. That's just, standard protocol where you really take it serious. But at the outset, one thing I always do, I want it to be natural and organic. So I don't mess with I just go off of instinct.
See how it feels. Just pick up and play.
Do I want to commit? Again, I talked about this previously, my 4-hour rule. I will give you, once I sit down and I will give you 4 hours. And in 4 hours, first of all, it should take less than that. It should take 10 minutes. But in 4 hours, if you can't grab me, I'm out. Anyway, So I grabbed it, grabbed him as a character, and I still can't explain it over 20 years later. I went in there and just wrecked everybody and everything. And unlike many of the other characters on there, like the Forest Laws and and everyone else, he was a character that was just more one move, go, timing, one move, go, timing. The punch that'll send you half across the room, the leg sweep or the leg sweep to the elbow, the quick elbow where you were thinking you were, timing this long punch to counter, then I hit you with the quick elbow, and everything just came to me like boom, boom, boom. And very similar to Gal in Street Fighter, he was more charge and go. You didn't technically have to charge, but it was all about timing, execute. It wasn't free flowing. And I got him and went to work, fell in love with the game. And one of the reasons why I also settled on Tekken 2 is because I asked myself this very important question when I was coming up with games for all four systems. What was the game that I recall putting the most time in voluntarily?
Right.
I did not play a single, and again, I love me some Legacy of Kain. I did not play a single game on the original PlayStation more than I played Tekken 2.
Listen, I'm an OG King fan. Then Tekken 3 came, it was Armor King. And then Tekken 4 is Kazuya, and it's been Kazuya ever since.
Yes.
So, but a lot of the reasons that you mentioned about Paul was why I liked King in the first one and the second one, because it was easy for me to pick up and play. Obviously, he's a power character.
Yes.
Right. But once you started getting the intricacies of his grappling, then he just became OP, in my opinion, which actually made it less appealing for me. So, but by the time 4 came around, I was interested in what you were talking about, where it was, let's get to the real combo heavy. Let's figure out a balance between somebody that's easy to pick up and play, but then has a set of combos that allows my skill set to grow.
Yeah, exactly.
And I fell in love with Kazuya, and that was it for me, because his combos aren't extremely difficult. They're enough to demonstrate my skill set while still being a mid power character.
Exactly.
So, and I've been with him ever since, man. Kazuya for the win, bro.
Tekken 2 and Final Fantasy 7, which is the most, if you want to talk about, I think, matter of fact, I can say this with confidence. I think Final Fantasy 7 is the most important of them all. I believe it, or if not the most important, it brought in new.
Yeah, I think that was the impact that it had. Is it brought an entire generation of people that style of game who, a lot like myself, had never experienced it before.
Right.
So at that time, it's 97 came out. So
97.
So I was 10, 11, right? So, for me, I was just getting into that, where I was interested in more than just playing a game. Like I was starting to get into story and storytelling and things like that. But it was also that first one that demonstrated, damn, look what graphics can do. Because it was the first one that I had ever seen where like you can move around while the cinematics were playing.
Exactly.
And I was like, man, this is crazy. Like graphics don't need to get any better than this. Obviously we've come a long way since the PS1. But at that time, that was just that broke the mold for me.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's so impactful for, that generation, because all of them kind of felt the same way. And they're like, damn, I just haven't played anything like this before. Yeah. This is different. So
game changer right there, man. And it's crazy to, I never told me that story. So for you to stumble onto it, basically by accident, it turned out to be your favorite game of all time.
All time.
You get no argument from me, man. So now we transition into what and I said it earlier, what I believe is the greatest console of all time, game system. And that is the PlayStation 2. Still the best catalog of games, I think, any system has ever had.
Hands down, in my opinion.
Well,
Super Nintendo being close second with classic, Final Fantasy VI, Chrono Trigger, things like that, which I didn't experience until after it came out on the PS1, actually. So, because when we started with the Nintendo, then my parents got me a Sega Genesis instead of a Super Nintendo. So I had missed that whole genre that wasn't really present on the Sega Genesis except for Phantasy Star, and I had never tried it. Right. So yeah, it was PS2 for me was it, bro. Like you coming from Final Fantasy 7 going into 8 and 9, you better believe that I just kept that string going, and everything that was in that genre on PS2 I ate up. So I'm excited to get into this,
So the PlayStation 2, when you're talking about choosing one game from the PlayStation 2, it was for me, you talked about how PS1 for you was the easiest. This for me was by far the toughest.
Okay.
This was by far the toughest one to choose. But I'm going to kick it off, man. And for me, And I went, and ultimately my deciding factor was, and I talked about this with PlayStation 1, according to my memories, as best I can remember, what was the game that I put the most time into?
Okay.
And that game was Grand Theft Auto San Andreas.
Oh man, GTA.
Theft Auto
Okay.
San Andreas. CJ, first of all, it was the most relatable to a degree,
Right,
a character where, I mean, no one plays Grand Theft Auto for the, for the characters or the stories or anything like that. But there was more familiarity with him as the lead, for certain reasons, select reasons, you figure it out,
right?
Than any other character, featured, right?
Okay.
But also think about the elements that you had as far as, it wasn't just obviously riding around, and we know what Grand Theft Auto is about. So let's come on now.
Right. Everybody knows at this point.
We all know. But again, so sort of like the RPG elements where you're like literally, pumping them up, getting them stronger. You're doing this, you're doing that. Just the size of that game and just the scope of that game.
Right.
That's one of those clearly 100+ hour games for me. And again, it is not, when you're talking about games that will define the PS2, if you would have asked me that question and say, just take the fun factor out of it, I'm going to name 30+ games before I get to Grand Theft Auto. But for me, when I say, okay, PlayStation 2, when the game came out and what it was to me at the time, and back then they were pumping out Grand Theft Autos like back to back. It's crazy because now they take their time and they earn the right to.
They make one for 3 generations.
They do, right? But yeah, I would say Grand Theft Auto, San Andreas. I think 3, obviously, it was a shock factor. And like, wow, like this is, it was what am I out of line if I say it's the introduction to modern open world sandbox?
No, I think you're right on the money. I think it was
going from the top down.
Yeah. And what most of the time, what we end up picking as those are ones that either define or draw you into an entirely new genre, right? Absolutely. And you're like, wow, I didn't think this could do this for me. So I get it, that makes sense to me. I'm with you.
Grand Theft Auto 3, man. Grand Theft Auto Vice City. Obviously, we had a character that had some personality because he actually talked.
Right.
He spoke. But down there in Miami, so it kind of had the Scarface vibe to it. So, I put time in with those two, but they didn't. Again, I talk about grabbing. They were more like, okay, if I went to somebody's house and I saw the sticks, I'll just pick it up, run around, do whatever, try to get the 5-star. We all did it. Don't judge.
Everybody.
We all did it. And but when it was done, all right. We good, ready to go. Let's roll.
Right.
Power this off.
All right.
Grand Theft Auto San Andreas was the one where I made time.
Okay.
I made time. And at that time, I was coming into adulthood, so it was no more just go to school, go to practice, go to boxing, and it was life, it was jobs, it was figuring out what I wanted to do. So again, at that point, I had to make time. And Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, clearly over 100 hours in, over a 2-year period,
right?
Because I would still play it the same way. Where when I had when I made time, I would play it and be done with it, but I committed to it,
right?
And there was no game more that I played as far as putting time in on the PlayStation 2 than Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. So Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, my top PlayStation 2 game. That was my choice.
I can respect.
What you got, man?
All right. This one's a little bit more difficult than the PS1 for me, but still far easier than the PS3 and PS4 era. And for me, on the PS2, it was God of War 2.
Ooh.
So if you remember what we had discussed as far as my passion and excitement as like the cinematic impact of games,
right.
I had also started to get into the more intricate action style of games, right? So PS2 era, OG Xbox was Ninja Gaiden Black, right? Because I was a big OG Ninja Gaiden fan on the original Nintendo. Man.
Ninja Gaiden Sigma, shout out. Man.
As well as Shinobi 3 on the Sega Genesis.
Yes.
So I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of, Japanese culture, specifically feudal Japan, which we'll play into something later. So once I started divvying and getting into the action hack and slash genre, the appeal of God of War 2, I remember going into a GameStop when I was a kid, and they had the God of War 2 demo. there, and it
That's
was
right.
it was the Colossus demo. And I remember playing it and, having those cinematic moments where the Colossus is just chasing you around and crushing everything. And I was like, again, it was another one of those things where I was like, damn, I've never seen, even though I had played the original God of War, this had elevated to a whole new level. That was the style of graphics that I loved. The gameplay had become more refined.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those factors is I was going into college. So I didn't really have a lot of time to sit down and play, consistently. So, small disclaimer, I literally beat this game over 40 times, and this is the reason why.
Wow.
I could sit down.
Wow.
I could sit down once you beat the game. If you remember, you can sit down with your powers all unlocked, right? So you could beat it in less
New Game Plus before New Game Plus.
Right. So you could beat it in less than 5 hours once you have your powers unlocked.
Right.
So that was for a very long time, my freshman year of college. That was literally the only game I had. So I would probably play maybe like 20 to 30 minutes a day. Right. Once everything was done, I just boom, boom. So in a week, I would be done.
Shout out to the PS2 memory card, by the way.
I would be done with my playthrough, like a week, and I'd be good. I'd be in there, So, and my freshman year of college, I really didn't spend a lot of time gaming at all. I was really starting to, obviously you're in college, you're exploring so many other different things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't spend a lot of time, but it was so impactful for me because the cinematics, they had introduced so many more things with the combat, going through and doing the Pegasus portions on there, which was so new, and how they were pushing that technology so forward, even though by then the PS3 had come out.
Yeah, man.
Right. So having no idea PS2 could still accomplish, all that, the replayability of it. I love the story. Like I know for a lot of people, and I'm gonna say most, but a lot of people, once they beat a story the first time, I know the story. I don't care about it anymore. Right. But for me, I still enjoyed that story of God of War, right? That one always drew me in as far as the overarching story. Kratos as a character, obviously needed to evolve later on down the line, but it was at that time, it was just that was it for me. Like I was like, this is it. Like this is my game right here, I'm 18, I'm like, I'm doing my thing. It's that let me just pick it up, play 30 minutes to an hour maybe, and then I'm crushing some skulls, doing what I need to do, and then put it down and move on about my day. So I beat that game, man, so many times that like by the time I loaded to the start screen, I was sick of it. That's how you played it so much, and you're like, I just can't anymore, So for me, that was it, man. That was my jam. God of War 2 was my jam. And like you said, when you talk about how many game hours you put in on it, like Final Fantasy 7, 4 different playthroughs. Literally the timer timed out like 99 hours and something for me. So I probably put 400 or 500 hours overall in that one game. That's how much I loved it, right? God of War 2, was one of those. It was like, of course, I played a lot of different things, but that was the one where it was like, this is clear to me. This is why I love, which is why God of War and Final Fantasy are my 2 favorite franchises.
Absolutely. So, oh man, God of War. Yeah, God of War 2. Yeah. And again, man, it's the catalog of PlayStation 2, man. I settled on Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, and obviously once you beat the main story, now the rest of it is just going around doing whatever, right? And just having, especially on fun. There you go, just having fun with it. So, but 2 games that and I got to throw them out there real quick before we move on. Capcom versus SNK 2, which I believe is still the best crossover Capcom style fighter that there has been, period. And then the second one, and this is still, and again, shout out to Ratchet and Clank, and love me some Ratchet and Clank, but Sly Cooper remains my favorite. Yeah, remains my favorite, platformer in that genre, right? So the original, put all kind of time into that, and is, much as that game just looks like your typical, almost like a kid's kind of animated. You know what I mean? Shout out to it's dope, man. Dope, and there's a lot of elements within it. There's a little bit of Metal Gear in it. It's a little bit of everything in that. And don't let the fact that it, the look fool you. That game is brilliant. So I had to throw those 2 in real quick.
Little fun factor for you. OG Sly Cooper on the PS3 remaster. Yeah. It's the first PS3 game I ever got a platinum trophy on. So there you go. Book it.
But so now we transition into PS3.
Yeah. This is my toughest. This is my toughest one, man. This is the hardest one for me to pick.
PlayStation 3, man. This, ironically, hint, you're looking at it. This ironically turned out to be the easiest one for me to pick. And for those who know me, you know why. But I'm gonna kick this to you, man. So the PlayStation 3, you said you had you sweating a little
This
bit.
is it. This is the hardest one. I'm gonna tell you why.
Had you sweating, man.
Because, like I said before, the one that the most impactful one is the one that gets me into a genre that I either never liked or never thought I would like. Okay. So full disclaimer before we get into the game I pick, I'm gonna tell you the ones that I struggle not picking. All right.
The ones that just missed the cut.
So God of War 3, I absolutely love. Like to this day, that opening sequence, going all the way up Mount Olympus, climbing up to Gaia, still to me is one of the most like epic openings of a video game, literally ever. Literally ever. I never get tired of it. Right. Mm-hmm. Also, Uncharted 2 was up there for me because how seamless they made that action adventure genre, that Indiana Jones Tomb Raider combination was immaculate. The graphics were crazy. The storytelling, the cutscenes, like the banter, like Uncharted 2 changed the game, right?
Is it your favorite of the
of all the
Legacy,
of all the Uncharted? Yes, Uncharted 2 is still my favorite.
Got it.
All right. So, and then if you want to talk about, the one that was the most, and I guarantee you're not going to see this one coming. Mm-hmm. But my favorite of all the PS3 games, the one I put the most time in, was Killzone 2. That was my number one.
Whoa!
And I'm gonna tell you why.
I was not expecting this at all. Get into it.
Before Killzone 2, everybody had talked about Halo and they had loved Halo, and I never got into that. Right. Because for me, it was about the story, like the designs of the characters. Right. And if I play a shooter, I gotta like the weapons. Never really liked the weapons in Halo. It is what it is. Right. So it was never really my thing. I had tried Modern Warfare when it came out because that was everything that everybody was on, but I was terrible at it. Right. So imagine going online and you're like 2 and 30, bro. I was getting wiped. Yeah. Right. I never really, it didn't draw me in. Right. Killzone 2, though, was the first shooter that I became obsessed with playing online. Why? That was my jam online for a few reasons. The weight of the weapons really made you develop the skill set of the timing because it had real sway. So it was hard. And I also liked the weapons. Now, to be fair, a lot of them were AR variants, right? Right. But for the most part, it was, okay, I can do this. I can use this weapon. Then it became, all right, I'm used to the class. Now let's figure out the map. Mm-hmm. And once I figured out the choke points in the map, then it become so easy for me that I started to realize the fun of playing a multiplayer shooter. So then I had, another friend that I play online with, whose PSN handle is Carrot Top 01. Mike, shout out to Mike back from the old retail days. We would play online and we wiped the map, and I mean like 34, 35, and sit. I mean, it was just cleaning up. It was ugly, and that was the first time that I really started to understand the appeal of the genre, right? Because to me, there was nothing sweeter than that kill sound effect. Look, when you kill somebody in Killzone, you get that headshot, or you just toast your grenade, throw it over, and don't even look. I mean, over the shoulder, Will Chamber. I mean, Kareem, Skyhook. I'm just running.
Would you say no goggles? Right?
Yeah.
No goggles.
So my Skyhook, and that was the first one that was the one that got me into FPS.
So you know what? I gotta throw this out there real quick. You talked about how COD 4, Modern Warfare, and obviously we look back now historically, that is one of the most important shooters as far as just bringing that genre along, particularly the multiplayer aspect. But you said it didn't grab you, but Killzone did. What was it about? You talked about what grabbed you with Killzone, but what was it about COD? Just for a split second, what happened? What was the difference?
So, because COD was the first one that I tried, and I hadn't developed a skill set for understanding the map and understanding, how quick you can get a kill in Call of Duty. Right. So I was always getting killed first. I enjoyed the campaign a lot, but when I went on to multiplayer, it didn't draw me in. Like it
didn't translate.
But Killzone, however, I liked the setting. But for some reason, man, I'm telling you, I played the fool out of that online. And that universe just drew, and man, it drew me in, man. And I love the weapons. I loved the fact that it took a lot of skill to kill somebody online, and I just worked at it. So it was more of like that gratification, right? And I loved the grenade variants on there, man. It did everything that I needed because it was still cinematic. It was my first real big online shooter. So there were so many factors so for me, it wouldn't have been Borderlands or Destiny without Killzone 2. Right. So
I can see that.
So that's what drew me into the genre. So as much as I love, and then I love me some Uncharted, Metal Gear Solid 4, even Little Big Planet.
Yeah, man. Shout out to Saint
God of War 3. I mean, there were so many great games. Infamous 1 and 2. God, I love those. But Killzone, out of all of those, literally drew me into an entirely new genre that I literally despised before. I was like, I'll never play. I'll never play a shooter. I remember people saying, you should play this game like Bioshock and all. Nope, I don't like doing first person. Like that was the one that it finally got me over that hump to where, I can appreciate that style of game now.
Absolutely, man.
I told you would not expect that one.
No, I was, the punch I did not see coming, baby. Right? Yeah. Had to wipe my gloves. Okay, let's get back in there.
What's happening?
For me, and again, it was, for those who really know me, and particularly for those who knew me at that particular time, and we had a conversation about this, when we first met.
Right.
That's how long we've been, me and you've been rocking. Ladies and gentlemen, it's right here.
Oh, Fight Night.
Fight Night.
I can't say I'm surprised by this choice.
Fight Night champion. All right. Ding, ding. And of course, there is a bias. Let's be real. There's a bias because of my love of the sport. But that doesn't stop me from being able to be honest about what is in front of me. Right. So we know that this series started out with Knockout Kings. And then it transitioned, way back on the PS1.
Muhammad Ali on there.
Yes, Ali on the cover, standing over listing. And then it transitioned into Fight Night. And there have been, some swings and connects with Fight Night. And there have been some swings and misses. And I will gladly, again, as much as I love this sport, I will gladly and first and foremost call it out when the game is not quite what it should be. When fighters are, when people who were in charge of, the character, not development as far as like creating them, but as far as just knowing how to mimic what they're all about. There were some fight nights that we had where I'm like, Pernell Whitaker doesn't do that, right? Or, Oscar De La Hoya doesn't hit that hard. Or Roy Jones, he's elusive, but he's not a great defensive fighter. Why do you have him just... So there were things that, again, if you are understanding the sport and understanding the ins and outs of the fighters, you saw some inaccuracies with some previous fight nights where you were like, okay, you can tell that they, as much like boxers that are shot, they can look the same, but that's not them. And so I was struggling with that. And then we get to Fight Night Champion. Not only was it the biggest roster of fighters that we had ever seen, it was the greatest example of the developers or whoever was in charge of really knowing the fighters as they were building the fighters from a presentation standpoint, knowing who they had. So Ali moved like Ali, George Foreman moved like George Foreman, Mike Tyson moved like Mike Tyson, meaning he had incredible punching power through 5 rounds. And no matter how you used him, by the time you got to the 8th and 9th round, he wasn't the same. Nuance, things like that particularly those who can appreciate the sport understand. Manny Pacquiao, quick, super fast. He punched faster. He hit harder than the Pernell Whitaker. Pernell Whitaker, very elusive defensively without putting your guard up, just like the real Pernell Whitaker. Rest in peace. Also with Fight Night Round 3, it was a legit story that was believable, and it wasn't a story it wasn't thrown in just so they can say, okay, hey, we put a story mode in here. No, it was legit. Andre Bishop, what happened with his brother, it showed you the side of boxing that unfortunately has existed since the sport's very inception, as far as how seedy it can be, how much, not, taking a dive here or doing this favor, how it can derail you despite your talents. But it also showed you how you can overcome. So I really enjoyed the story campaign, loved the balance of the fighters. I love the choice of fighters. I love how they were represented. And just, for full disclosure, I probably put 70 hours with Marvelous Marvin Hagler. I put him to work, gave everybody to work. Everybody to work, all right?
Everybody got their work.
Everybody got their work, man. Everybody, was like, all right, just count to 10. I'm done. Just, this is not fair. You know the sport, and now you're just good at the game. I hate you, right?
So are you saying, are we talking about Dudley Street Fighter 4? Got that work?
Dudley Street Fighter 4. And it's funny you mentioned that.
That damn elbow. Dre knows what I'm talking about.
Shout out to Dre.
Shout out to Dre, man.
And shout out to my man JJ as well, man. We had our battles as well, the Nightcrawler. But no, man, I would say this. It is the best of the Fight Night / Knockout Kings. And unfortunately, it's the last one. We did not get a Fight Night, on the PS4. And we didn't get it this console generation, PS4, Xbox. It didn't appear. And hopefully, we'll see that down the line. So that is my PlayStation 3. If I can only pick one, Fight Night Champion. Let's get that on the camera one more time, man. A classic. We talk about on previous episodes of Champions Material, classic albums.
Right.
This is a classic game.
I see it.
I think all the games, for different reasons that we've mentioned so far are, in our opinion, classics. Mm-hmm. Right. But man. So Fight Night Champion. Now, here we go. PlayStation 4.
It's tough.
PlayStation 4 is right behind PS2 as one of the handful of greatest systems of all time. And that means what we've gotten so far from the very beginning. And, starting with Infamous Second Son, loved Infamous Second Son, and all the way up to, you had talked about it previously, Ghost of Tsushima. From start to finish, the PlayStation 4 has delivered. So you want to talk about picking one game? It was tough. I'm gonna go ahead and kick this off, man. I decided to bring this topic up, so I'm gonna go ahead and get in there.
I'm excited to hear it.
I came, full disclosure, for the audience out there, I came this close to picking Detroit Become Human. Loved that game. Loved that game. Although Heavy Rain on PS3, for me, sentimentally will always be my favorite out of that team. Shout out to Quantic Dream. Detroit Become Human. The complexity of the different characters, the complexities of those characters, they were all very different for different reasons. Having what was a robot, literally be the most humane woman in the entire, game as far as her storyline. Love Detroit, but that came a close second, or excuse me, a close third. Second game, God of War.
Okay.
It was right there on the cusp. It was almost there. To take, and we talked about this on the previous episode, the Replayables episode with my man Craig. To take a proven formula, you just heard Ben talk earlier. He spoke to God of War 2 and how brilliant that was, God of War 3. To take a proven formula, especially in this climate, in this day and age, when you're talking about, there's an investment to make these games now, therefore there is an expectation that you get your money back and then some. And to take a proven formula and flip it, and still give you enough familiarity for what you were accustomed to, but then combine a story element that led the game, unlike previous, in my opinion, previous God of Wars. And to have those two things blend together to get what we got, shout out to Carl, shout out to his team, again, brilliant. But there was one game, so if I'm heaping that type of praise on Detroit and God of War, and mind you, I didn't even mention Spider-Man, and among others, I can go on and on, right? If I'm heaping that type of praise on those titles, if I was to pick a title above that, that means this title truly stands out. Horizon Zero Dawn is my game if I can only pick one. Aloy, it was a character that fascinated me because this was an individual that as a child, she was basically ostracized and shunted aside because she was different. Sound familiar? I won't get that deep, but you understand what I'm saying, right? And she made a choice to not only overcome that and find herself and discover herself, but once she did, she decided to, or as the story continued to evolve, she continued to evolve. And one thing I can appreciate, having a daughter of my own is I did not derive a single bit of the appeal I had from her as a character based on presentation. This was not a tomb. Again, this is not any shade, but this is not a Tomb Raider situation where part of the appeal, frankly, is the physical appeal.
Right.
Had
Nothing.
She had none of that.
Nope.
She left an impression just based on finding herself, being herself, and overcoming. And then the world, and then when you combine that with what I believe, including what we got this year, we got some bangers this year. You know, when we're talking about Last of Us 2 and Ghost of Tsushima, among others, I believe it's the best presentation. Or put it this way: if it's not the best, if it has been surpassed,
Most unique.
and also wow factor.
Okay.
I remember the first time, like once I went through the general tutorials, I transitioned from being the child to an adult. Did the first sort of training as far as the arrows, right? With her mentor, I forget his name off the top of my head, in Horizon Zero Dawn, the mentor that really kind of taught her.
Or Rost or something like that.
Rost.
Okay.
That sounds familiar. You know, correct us if we're wrong, but
We probably are, but it sounds close.
well, you get the point, right? After that, I remember open world. I remember going around and just exploring before I did anything else within the story and just going, I cannot believe that they pulled this off. To have mechanical, oversized, mechanical dinosaurs in this prehistoric world, to blend those two things and for it to seamlessly feel like it makes sense within the story arc of a game like that, that game to me is the best IP that we introduced on the PlayStation 4, meaning it had not previously appeared.
Right.
It's one of the best new IPs I think we've seen across all consoles in the last several years. The game to me was borderline perfect. And you want to talk about replay? Stop it. Especially once I got there. What was the suit that you got when you got all the power set?
Right. Yeah.
That suit, and I was practically, you know what I mean,
Invincible, pretty much.
Yeah. Going back and playing that new game. Plus, we got Frozen Wilds as well. So, and that wasn't just a throw in and an add on like that. That had some meat to it as well, some meat on the bone there. So, yeah, man. Shout out to Gorilla. And again, you know, Killzone, right?
Right.
And for them to be able to, you know, produce something that epic, going away from what was a proven formula. Because again, they're coming from a completely different realm of the type of games that they were, you know, obviously Killzone. And to go and produce that, none other. Horizon Zero Dawn, man.
You know what? That's funny you mentioned that because remember when I got my 4K TV and I'm sitting there, I got my PS4 Pro hooked up, and I was just thinking about watching the opening sequence that they showed where she was on top of that mountain and the sun ray was coming in,
right?
And she walks over, and I remember just looking at it in 4K and just looking at the hair strands and watch how the hair flowed and all that stuff. And I literally just stared at the TV like, this is incredible. Like this looks like this is a whole different
How
generation.
many wow moments have you had? Oh, like the very first wow moment where I just could not concentrate on the game itself. I just could not. It was just crazy. I couldn't process how good it looked. It was a game called Soul Calibur on the Sega Dreamcast. Yep. It was a fighter. It was a 3D fighter. By then, Tekken 2 had finally brought me over in a 3D fighter, so I was in. But you know, how many wow moments have you had just on presentation like that, right? So again, another one of the reasons why Horizon Zero Dawn will always stand out, regardless of how much time passes. It will be a replayable down the line. But yeah, I'm sorry, you had a point you were making?
No, I remember just kind of thinking about what you were talking about, that wow factor. And you know, obviously, before you get to her ritual, you know, early in the game,
right.
You know, so that way I don't spoil much. But just seeing like the interactivity in the world and how different it looked than anything else that was out and anything else that they had done before, and like you said, how it blended, you know, machines with the natural world. I mean, it was incredible. Like I just remember we was just playing on Pro, and I'm like, this is insane. Like, this isn't making sense. I remember literally going, this is PS5 graphics. Like, you remember saying that? And I was this can't be right. Like, wait a minute. Nothing looks as good. So I'm with you, man, like all the way. And so I can understand completely because my love of the RPG genre, right? I get the appeal of drawing you into a world and then letting you interact.
Absolutely.
And get to know the characters and you start to relate with one or the other. And then, you know, that's you can make a connection with them. So I get it. That makes sense to me.
How important is relatability to a story that grabs you in video games? It just seems like those two, you know, go hand in hand.
Yeah.
But so again, you know, for me, Horizon Zero Dawn, my man Ben, if you can only pick one PlayStation 4 game that stands out above the rest to you, What is it, my man? Let the people know.
This is literally my toughest one, mostly because you got to battle that recency bias, right? Like it's the newest generation, so it's the freshest on the mind.
Yeah.
Right.
You're still in it technically.
So here I'm gonna lay it out, and I'm gonna literally tell you it's 1A, 1B, 1C, possibly 1D. And I'm gonna have to pick one. All right, this is tough for me. So leading up to the ones that are not number one overall, 100%. First, Witcher 3. Because the Witcher 3 for me,
after they cleaned it up, yes,
it was so impactful because for the vast majority of open world games, remember, I have to enjoy the traversal and I have to enjoy the world. Well, the world itself was so like the technology they used for the wind to sway and everything, it just felt so alive. And I loved, for most of them, even for Skyrim for me, Skyrim, Fallout, a lot of those were main story was short. Side, you could just run around and do what you like, but when it came to the side quests didn't draw me in to where I wanted to do everything in the world.
Yeah.
Witcher was the first one where every damn side quest I did was just phenomenal. And like every one of them had like their own little mini story arcs that made me want to play everything in that game. Like I wanted to explore everything. I wanted to
feel repetitive.
No, and that's the first open world game that accomplished that for me.
Right.
Like I was like, good gosh, I don't want to stop playing this. Like, because I'm so big on story. It had very good combat, not compared to other like action games like Bloodborne or anything like that, but for what it was very enjoyable for me. So Witcher was fantastic, especially I have been a fan since the original Witcher.
Right.
So that came out on PC. I had one game on my little mini laptop, and it was the Witcher Enhanced Edition. So that was my first introduction to it. And I had followed it all the way through. So for most people, Witcher 3 was the first one they ever played.
Right.
But for me, I was like, y'all are not ready, right? Especially coming from that Dragon Age kind of fantasy, time period. So that's one. I could go on that game all day. We're gonna move to the next one. The other one that was so close for me was also God of War on PS4. And that is because not only I remember I told you Final Fantasy and God of War are my favorite franchises. So after Ascension, I was like, I'm ready for God of War to be done. As probably the biggest God of War fan in the world, I was like, man, I think it's time for rest. So I was extremely nervous about them continuing the franchise. Right. And they far exceeded any expectation I could have possibly had for that game. To change a whole new setting, to keep that character and evolve him and make it relevant. But his development in that game in particular is I can relate to, because let's just say like there's someone in my life that was very similar to the old Kratos. Yeah. And seeing that kind of transformation and the way he would try to teach hits so close to home to me that I was like, this is deep right here. And I didn't think you could reach that emotional depth in God of War. I just didn't think that was possible. Right. But also, again, my love for cinematics and cinematography, and having, a media studies degree, being that game that is a one shot all the way through, it blew my mind. So it's like, wow, no one's ever pulled this off. Right. And to be able to do that and see things like when you're climbing up the mountain and you get into that battle inside the mountain with, I won't name what or who it is, for those unfortunate people who haven't played it yet. Spoiler free. But just that cinematic experience to me is like first class. Yeah. Like no one does it like Santa Monica. Agreed. Absolutely. And so it was so close for me. However, now on any given day, it could be one or the other, right? But my number one, and this solely has to do with the replayability factor over everything else. And just overall, what I like when it appeals to several different things that I like, plus the replayability, this is why it's my number one. And that is Neo 2. All right. So again, listen, man, I got flavors of the day, but I have over, we're talking about when the game grabs you, you just want to pick it up and play it. And like even in adult, things, everything that are going on, when you start to make time to play it, that's when you really enjoy it. So those who I play online with know how much I've put over 200 hours on Neo 2.
Man.
All right. So I'm gonna explain to you why I love it just so much. Number one,
Neo 2.
It combines so many different genres and time periods and gameplay styles and gameplay functionality that I love. Yeah. Number one, feudal Japan. Remember, I mentioned it before how much I love that setting, and we didn't get a lot of it up until, because I was a huge Onimusha fan and Genji, OG PS3. If anybody remembers Genji,
yeah.
I love feudal Japan, so why I'm a big like Samurai Warriors fan. Nobunaga, all that time period is still to this day, it's such a huge draw for me. So I love the fact that it feels very much like I'm playing an Onimusha game.
Wow, yeah, okay.
With the combat and speed and the reflex of Ninja Gaiden. So, and then you take that in 60 FPS and you switch stances to where you have a lot of the stances from a lot of my favorite characters from Dynasty Warriors and Samurai Warriors, like Yukimura Sanada, which a lot of people don't know. My PSN ID is Hiroyuki Sanada. A lot of people don't know that that's where that came from.
Okay.
That's where that came from. What? 15 years later, people probably figured it out.
Yeah, first time I saw it, I was like, this is clever.
Like, this is different.
Right.
And then you have the loot structure of Diablo.
Yeah.
Well, so you've got common, rare, you all the way up to, divine gear. So there's that constant chase for, something else. And then you can temper it, you can remodel it, you can fashion it how you want. So like you can equip gear that makes you look terrible, but then fashion it to the way that you like your character to look. So you've got all these factors. And then on top of that, being the structure of a Souls game, except where it's not one giant hub world, I can beat a level in 25, 30 minutes and feel like I accomplished something, which is different from, like, I love Souls games, right? But when I'm in that hub world for so long, it just feels like it doesn't end, whereas I feel like I'm making progress in Neo. Okay. So when you put those together, plus the fact that it has 3-player co-op online, and so there's always a replayability factor. Because you can ask anybody, anytime anyone's down to play Neo, I'm like, yeah, I'm there. Because it's something that I love. The weapon variety is great. The loot variety is great. The customization. The story is solid for what you would expect. It doesn't like really grab you necessarily. It's more there to get you through.
Complimentary.
But man, you want to talk about a game that I can always pick up and play, like literally from day one. Like if I had it right here, right now, I would play it. So now with the other games, I've beaten those and they've been incredible experiences. And I might start a second playthrough, but for me, but I've beaten Neo to 100% twice, like in medium and on hard. And then each time they do a new DLC, they do a new difficulty level. So it gives you another reason to go back through the game. With better loot and better drops and new weapons.
And I think this has to be thrown in just for a moment. Neo and Neo 2, we were talking about Souls, and I would kind of leave Bloodborne out because it's more offensive. But the point that I'm making is these games are meant to challenge you.
Right.
So when Ben is talking about going through and playing it through 100% twice, and obviously the second time being a higher difficulty level, with a game that is meant to challenge you, like in all aspects, right? It speaks to how great the game must be to put yourself through that willingly and to make time as an adult to do that. You know what I mean? So, and for the people out there listening who are familiar, you know what I'm talking about with Neo, right? So yeah, I just had to throw that out there, man. When you talked about going through it twice,
right?
Got my respect.
It might have to happen again, and that's the appeal of it. When you have a group of friends online that also enjoy that same, have that same passion for it, it gives you another reason to pick it back up. Because then you might have somebody else like, hey, can you run me through it? Yeah, no problem. We'll get you through that. Or you have somebody that's like, hey, I already did this run. let's go on to the next difficulty and let's see, what we can do.
See what we got.
So for me, and man, when I tell you, Last of Us Part 2, incredible. Ghost of Tsushima, incredible. Spider-Man, incredible. God of War, like these games, man, stick with me. But as far as just picking it back up and getting right back into it when I get 20, 30 minutes, maybe an hour, Neo 2 is literally the first thing I go to. So that has to be, like, that factor is what puts it at the top for me.
Stands alone.
And it doesn't necessarily mean like the most impactful that sticks with me, but just as far as what I enjoy, it has everything that I enjoy about a video game all in one game. So
yeah, man. Yeah.
Neo 2.
Neo 2.
Shout out to Neo, Team Ninja, Ninja Gaiden crew.
Certified replayable.
Absolutely.
Champions material approved. All right. My goodness. All right. So let's go ahead and we're gonna hit this last topic and Frank, and full transparency, man. This is the one I was looking forward to the most.
I believe it.
The wish list. All right. So we have seen, no doubt, some great games so far that's coming to next gen, and obviously next gen is around the corner. Mm-hmm. Now, we talked about PS1, 2, 3, 4. I'm gonna ask you this one more time, but in a much more less stressful situation. If there is one game, whether it's a franchise that, in full disclosure, it most likely will be a franchise that has already been introduced, right? Mm-hmm. Just for the sake of this topic. If there's a game that you have not seen yet, if they came to you and said, you know what, we're going to make you our decision maker. So 2022, we're going to go ahead and get this thing cracking right now.
This is easy for me, Sean. This is easy.
Ben Chandler, let us know the game and we will get right to it. What game?
So I'm going to tell you. So first of all, one of them, I feel like we have this exact same idea. Okay. So I'm going to, if I'm thinking the same thing you're thinking, I'm going to let you have that one.
All right.
Full disclosure, we did not discuss what games we were going to pick, but I have a feeling I know which one he's going to pick. Okay. Mm-hmm. But number one for me is easy. And it actually is one of my brother's favorite games.
Okay.
And that is a long lost Japanese RPG, Legend of Dragoon. That would be, if I had my choice today, hands down, that's why, especially if you look at technology we have now, and how we could do something. And I'm gonna tell you why, because the one, like my number one of all time that I wanted already got announced, which was Final Fantasy VII Remake. So
yes,
I cried tears of joy as a grown ass man when they announced that.
No shame.
So and that turned out to be better than I even thought it would. So that surprised me. But yes, Legend of Dragoon, Dark Rose, like you name it, bro. Especially if you wanted to go back to the prequel wars and the original game. If they would explore that with modern tech, with modern combat, that would do it for me. Like we're like, yo, I'm there day one. I don't care what version it is, just give it to me. I need it.
Let's get this thing popping.
So Legend of Dragoon, hands down. Like I've been wanting that literally since PS1. And then obviously they already announced the Final Fantasy VII Remake, so I'm excited to see how they continue that with that storyline. But Legend of Dragoon, hands down. Sony, we want it. We need it. Sony Japan, listen, y'all can do it. I promise you, it can be done. Let's make it happen.
Yes, we can. All right. Yes, we can. Wow. That's okay. Well, you dropping some bombs today. I'm talking about out of nowhere.
Legend of Dragoon. Don't let it die. Keep the movement going, baby.
All right. Yes, we can. For me, and as particularly as we talked about the PS4 console generation, myself and Ben, we mentioned several games. There is, and I think you knew where I was going. There is one game and one series that we both are fans of, major fans of. In fact, for me specifically, this series is my number one series of all time. And I'm talking about Street Fighter.
Okay.
Now, Street Fighter 3 Third Strike is my favorite of all Street Fighters. I believe
it's the best one. That's why.
Yeah, and Street Fighter 4 close second. There was a reason why when we talked about some great games that have come out on the PlayStation 5 or just period in this last console generation, neither of us mentioned Street Fighter 5. And there's a reason. When you go through the linear history of Street Fighter, I'm talking about the 2 series, the Alpha series, the 3 series, the 4 series. for most people, 5 is their least favorite. And for me, it is my least favorite. It's by far the one that I put the least amount of time into. It was 5 is by far the one that I have least invested in as far as just, again, time and just sort of my energy and whatever. Um, Street Fighter 5 for me has many problems. It got off the ground kind of rough. It's recovered, but ultimately, just from a gameplay experience, from a character balance experience, just from a balance of offense defense, I believe that Street Fighter 5 I have too many issues with it that I can't. My son and I will actually, he's a fan of it right now. So shout out to the champ, Sebastian. We'll put time in with it. But Street Fighter 5 has not been a game that I've really much made time for in the last 3 years. I gave it its time, launch year 2016, because again, it was my favorite series. I was going to invest. And at some point, I just told myself, this is not what I'm trying to turn it into, and I need to stop. And I did.
That's fair enough.
So when you're talking about a wish list for this upcoming console generation that we're going to have coming, I'm going to get right to it. Street Fighter 6. I want Street Fighter 6, and I know it's going to happen. I know it's going to happen. And I am looking forward to it. I believe there are a lot of lessons that can be learned from, Street Fighter 5. There's a lot of lessons that can be learned from all of them.
Put Dudley in the game. That's the lesson you should learn.
Man, you put Dudley in Street Fighter 6. You won't see me. You won't know me.
Yep.
I will literally be the Shadow Man. I would just appear. You would just see a pad. You'll see a game pad or a controller. You won't see nothing else but smoke. Yeah. I'll be like the noob Sabot of.
There you go.
No, but all kidding aside, Street Fighter 6. I want it. I trust Capcom. And again, Street Fighter 5 is not a terrible game by no means. It's just one that I have not. It's the one that I've least enjoyed. I feel like Street Fighter 6 has a chance to be epic. There were some misses for certain characters that I wanted to see in 5 that we're not going to get. Fei Long, hello, what's going on?
Absolutely, yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Among others, we've gotten some characters where I'm like, okay, so you left out this person for that person? Mm-hmm. All right, okay. So I just want Street Fighter 6, and I want it to be done right. And again, you're talking about a legacy of over 30 years. So I'm not going to take any gripes I have for any one Street Fighter and have that, throw a shade over what has been, multiple, literally decades of excellence, right? Street Fighter is still, I'll still throw up the Daigo parry from Third Strike every now and then and still get a kick out of it, right? The most iconic moment in competitive fighting game history. Shout out to Daigo. So I want Street Fighter 6.
Would you say, I would almost compare, I would say Street Fighter 5 is the Final Fantasy 13 of the series. That's what I would say. And as a Final Fantasy fan who's played literally all the main series, Type 0, some tactics, 13 I enjoyed, but I could clearly see the glaring issues that the rest of the community did not enjoy. So I would agree with you on Street Fighter 5. As much as I keep trying to get into it, it doesn't draw me in like 4 did, and definitely not Third Strike. No. So yeah, if they can get it even close to the balance that Third Strike had, look out.
And balance, yes, please. Characters and also just a balance with the characters that you choose to put in the game. There's no point of growing these rosters as Street Fighter has always tended to do, to get to 35 plus 40 plus characters. When you're talking about from a real competitive balance standpoint, only 15 to 20 are really playable. But what's the point? Yep. If you're going to take the time to develop them and put them in a game and advertise them and promote them, do it right. Right. And one of the things I've always appreciated and loved about Street Fighter is when done right, there's a variety of characters, and it makes you go back in the lab because you're not going to use every character the same way. Yep. There are similarities to certain characters, but there's enough variety typically where it brings you back to learn, okay, I'm going to play with this character this way. I'm going to play with this character this way. So again, love the series, just not quite as big of a fan. I think the Final Fantasy 13 analogy is accurate. Again, not terrible, but the drop off.
It wasn't the quality you would expect.
So Capcom, let's get to it. Let's get back in the lab, so to speak, and let's see Street Fighter 6 on next gen, and let's see it done right, man. That is on my wish list. So
absolutely,
this was great stuff, man, and this was a long time coming, my man. On that note, want to thank you, man.
Yeah, thank you.
I
Thanks
want
for
to,
having me, man.
I want to thank you for coming on Champions Material. My thanks to you out there for taking the time, all the ladies and the gentlemen taking the time to listen, your feedback, your support. Hopefully you got something positive you can take from you, man. And it was great to kind of go down memory lane, right? To kind of, again, have a healthy appreciation for what we've had and the greatness of what we've had. And then also it puts us in a position where we are, hopeful and confident that we have greatness ahead of us as we go into the next generation of consoles. So before we get up out of here, man, any last words for the people out there, man? What you got for them?
Listen, if we can get another Battle Arena Toshinden, that would be fantastic. Bloody Roar, where you at? Come holler at me. No, I'm just playing. Shout out to Battle Arena Toshinden, man. PS1,
man.
true classic.
Yes.
Deadly bang. So outside of that, no, man, keep doing what you're doing. I appreciate, taking the time out. I'm excited for next gen. Like I said, I love the direction that Sony is pushing when it comes to the quality and the consistency.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just excited for everybody to be competing because right now it's really like everybody's fever pitch, man. They're excited for the new tech.
Everybody's all in, man.
Yeah.
And that's what you want, as a consumer and as a fan, and as a, person that, as an individual who makes time and has a passion for something. You want competition. You want people who are all in.
Exactly. So that's what I got, man.
All right. And as always, shoot any feedback over to champions.materialsv@gmail.com. Obviously, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Check out the official Champions Material YouTube channel. We post episodes there, including this one. Beyond that, everybody, just stay strong, stay safe, continue to grow, and continue to walk in your truth. And never forget, whoever you want to be and whatever you want to be, always be the champion of it. That is Champions Material. Now stay tuned. We'll be back sooner than later with our next episode. But now, we're done.